will today see another Alabama football commitment?
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama, HSA's radio network. Luke Robinson, that's me, and Bama Online's Jimmy Stein, that's him. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I'll tell you about FanDuel in just a bit, and thank you for making this your first listen. Appreciate you guys every day. Now, today at 2 o'clock, we have learned, and probably the rest of y'all learned, Kaleb Edwards will be announcing his commitment to some school. We're not sure who yet, but we think it's going to be Alabama. And when that happens, Jimmy, assuming it's Alabama, you will have more of a detailed soliloquy on Kaleb Edwards, and we will put that out.
Yeah, I hope I don't have to make that rhyme, if that's a poem. I mean, for one thing, and this is kind of an outlier in the Saban era, it's really more the Saban era than the DeBoer era. Kaleb Edwards would be day one, by far the most highest rated or ranked tight end in the tight end room. Because I mean, even CJ, I just pulled up those numbers. CJ Dupree is like in the 800s. Josh Cuevas wasn't ranked at all. Robbie Oost was like in the 500s. The highest rated tight end we have on the team in terms of where it was ranked coming out of high school is Ty Lockwood. And even he was in the low 200s.
Kind of unfair because Caleb Odom was listed as a tight end
correct.
when he was recruited.
Correct. And Amari Knobloch was also very highly rated, and he transferred out very recently. So we did have two highly ranked tight ends. They're just not in the current tight end room. Amari Knobloch is in Texas's tight end room, and Caleb Odom's playing wide receiver. So Caleb Odom's playing wide receiver. Kaleb Edwards would again easily be the highest ranked tight end in the room. He would be a huge uptick in what we've been able to land lately, taking the Knobloch and Odom news into account. And keep this in mind, Knobloch and Odom were highly ranked, but they're wide receivers. I mean, Amari Knobloch is going to have to add significant size if he wants to play pro football. Caleb Odom is even playing wide receiver, is lanky enough to pull that off. So Kaleb Edwards is 235. I mean, he's showing up a physical presence. So it's going to be big if it goes Alabama's way. We've predicted that at BOL, that it would go Alabama's way. And everyone should tune in at 2 o'clock. And shortly after the commitment is made, if it's Alabama, we'll put out a little video with a little more of a breakdown of Kaleb Edwards' skill set.
If it is Alabama, Jimmy, assuming it is Alabama, where would that put the class? Would it take it to number one?
No, it would not put Alabama at number one. The math isn't mathing that way. It wouldn't be number one, but it would create some gap between Alabama and the teams below it. So in other words, it would be further solidifying Alabama's spot at number two. I think for Alabama to move to number one, you're going to have to add some 5 stars. And that could happen because as we've predicted or leaned, I mean, no secret that Caleb Cunningham from Mississippi, A.K. Deere from Quitman, Mississippi, Ty Haywood, the offensive tackle from Dallas. These are 5 stars. And, boy, you add those to your list, and it really changes the math as far as the recruiting rankings go. So Alabama's going to have to add those 5 stars to take a real leap at Ohio State. And I'll say this, I don't think it would come down to this specifically, but if you want to catch Ohio State, and, you know, some will care about that more than others, but if you want to catch Ohio State, the key to it math-wise might be removing a 5-star from their list, like, say, Naeem Offord, and adding him to Alabama's list. And that is something that could possibly happen, though I don't believe that as of today, and I wouldn't predict that, but it's possible. Ohio State's going to be tough to catch this cycle. They've been very aggressive.
Well, not only that, but that would be pretty incredible. That's the old 10-star swap. I mean, it's a 10-star movement, right? If you take Naheem from them and put Naheem with us, then obviously that may be enough. But
Yeah.
I think that you're right. I think Ohio State probably has been incredibly aggressive, both in the transfer portal and in this particular class. And now that may be the way they are for, the rest of eternity. But I think that this is more of a short-term thing. Like we're gonna spend a lot here right now, and then I think we'll see some other teams at the top doing that occasionally. Like if they feel like this is the year to make a move or whatever, that they may spend a little extra versus what they would normally spend. Ohio State's always going to be in the top 5 of recruiting, just like I think Alabama will be. But some years they're going to spend more than others, right?
That's exactly how I feel in terms of how it's going to go. Because money that pours into collectives isn't a static number. It's up and down number based on people's willingness to give and not even get a tax deduction. So, so it's going to go up and down. And Ohio State as a whole, their fan base right now is extremely aggressive. They're fired up. We use this analogy all the time. If you want to know why Ohio State suddenly is this way, imagine as Alabama fans,
all right,
you've lost you've lost to Auburn 4 years in a row, and then watched Auburn win the national championship. Alabama fans would be in a giving mood, to say the least.
Yeah, I just had a little glitch in the system right there, Jimmy. I don't know if everybody else did, and really sometimes I don't know that there's a glitch until after this is posted. So just letting everybody know, I'm on vacation at the beach and all of my family is still asleep. So I'm down in the lobby doing this. Jimmy is at his mother's and doing house shopping in Daphne. Isn't all that correct? So excuse, what do you pardon our progress is what we say here in the construction business occasionally. Right.
Yeah. So sometimes, just like you're not always in charge of your Wi-Fi, just like you're not always in charge of whether your NIL money is going up or down. But Ohio State definitely up. Alabama,
Jimmy.
But we will we will see.
I'm right there with you.
We'll see.
Okay.
2 o'clock today is the Kaleb Edwards announcement.
And we will have a video about that we will put out, assuming it's Alabama. So be on the lookout for that. And when we come back, we're also going to get back into Jimmy Stein's world famous countdown, which is a ton of fun. And we're starting to get into the meat of the matter. Thus, why I named the thumbnail on YouTube Meat of the Matter. But right now, I want to tell you about FanDuel. We all love FanDuel. You love FanDuel. You use FanDuel all the time. I know you should. If you don't, you're crazy. What's wrong with you? Get on it. I love sports. You love sports. We all love sports, and we love them so much that we never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and make the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports partner of Major League Baseball. Okay, we have reached the meat of the matter with Jimmy Stein's countdown, and we're getting into some offensive linemen here. I think what we're going to do is now we're in the mid to low 30s. So, and again, this is just me guesstimating because I don't have access to Jimmy's countdown before anybody else. Because I like to be surprised too, and I'd like to say, "Hey, this is stupid." If I say this is stupid, I want to be able to say it with, conviction and authority and genuineness. So, or if I say this is awesome, I do the same thing. It's rare that I say this is awesome. So Jimmy, we got into Wilk Inform Me, who is a pretty local product for Alabama. He's got the look of sort of a country come to town, mean offensive lineman that he's got. To me, just on the hoof, he looks like kind of a Gene Stallings-esque former offensive lineman. Just somebody Gene Stallings would like that he's like, yeah, he looks like the kind of guy who would play offensive line for G. Stallings.
I like that a lot, that comp, because I think if you want to come up with a Bama comp for Wilkin Formby, how about Wesley Britt, in terms of like how similar they are in terms of size, athletic ability. And of course, Wesley Britt was a really good player for Alabama, I think all SEC, and then played in the NFL for several years. I think Wilkin Formby could have a similar career at Alabama. And look, the reason I have Formby and I'm going to tease a little bit about the next guy. Of course, you can see him up on the screen there, Elijah Pritchett. I put them back-to-back for a reason here at 34 and 33. They're back-to-back on the countdown because this is going to be maybe the best battle of fall camp is going to be Wilkin Formby versus Elijah Pritchett. I think it's one of the few positions in fall camp that there will be a battle in terms of who's going to end up being the starter. Neither player has a lot of experience. They're both very young. Elijah Pritchett is a redshirt sophomore. He played last year quite a bit at left tackle during the part of the season that Caden Proctor was struggling. They would put in Elijah Pritchett as a way to try to get some better play at left tackle, or at least push Proctor. It worked in the sense that Proctor became a better player, down the stretch last year, in part because he was in danger of maybe losing his position at one point. But let's be honest, when Pritchett played, it wasn't always great, and he was a redshirt freshman. He struggled as well. I remember Arkansas in particular was a game that maybe wasn't his best. But he's a year older. He's a year better. We have different coaching in the offensive line. I think that's made a difference. And I think having the different scheme and different coaches is what allowed Wilkin Formby to have such a noisy spring. He was the starter at right tackle for most of the spring, while Pritchett started at left tackle. Now, that's all changing with the arrival of Caden Proctor back from out of the portal, as Proctor is assumed to retake his position at left tackle, leaving just one tackle position open. And again, it will be a Formby-Pritchett battle. We're at Formby in the countdown and the roster ranking at number 34. I have him slightly behind Pritchett, meaning that I believe I would still install Pritchett as a slight favorite to win the battle. But I'm just basing that based on age and some game experience. I do think in the long term, the long run, Formby is likely to prove the better player. I think down the road. The question, though, for this season, and this ranking and this roster ranking is about this season, is, well, who's going to win the job this year, right? It could literally go either way. This is a coin flip situation. You might see them both play as they try to figure out who's going to perform the best in the games. But the good news for Alabama fans is that the other four spots in the offensive line are settled. This is the one spot that's not, and both Formby and Pritchett have considerable upside. These are two guys with NFL potential in the long run. Formby just hasn't really played at all. I think he played about 12 or 13 snaps last year during his redshirt season. Pritchett played more, but didn't play great. When he got his opportunity, he was still a young player in this league. So let's see how they adapt to the new coach, Coach Kapelevich, Coach Cap, as they call him. It's a new scheme, a new system. They tend to like lighter, more athletic guys on the offensive line, and both Formby and Pritchett fit that description. They're not the monster 350-pounders we saw last year. Both Formby and Pritchett weigh about the same. I think they're both listed. I think Formby might be listed at 310, Pritchett around 312. I mean, that's how close they are in terms of size. Formby a little longer, maybe an inch or so taller. But a lot of upside here, Luke, a lot of potential. But neither one has played considerable snaps, and neither one has played well in games. So this is sort of a mystery spot for Alabama going into the season, the one spot on the offensive line that is not secure.
Well, you said something kind of interesting there. You said neither one has played well in games. How much have they played at all? And so what you're saying is when they have played, they haven't played well?
Well, Pritchett.
Okay,
Pritchett's played. Formby only played about 13, 14 snaps, in garbage time last year. I'm sure he did fine. What I mean is they're unproven. Formby's unproven, at this level. He just hasn't played in games yet as a redshirt freshman. Pritchett has played even fairly substantially, but hasn't played well when he's been given the opportunity. But again, he was really young. This is a developmental position. But the good news is they're both a year better, both a year older. And I like the new offensive line coach, Coach Cap, very well traveled, but the players like him, doing well in recruiting. He's sort of your old school out of Central Casting offensive line coach, right? I mean, he's sort of, before you ever saw him, you could kind of guess what he looks like, what he talks like. He's the stereotype, for better or worse, right? I mean, he's old school. He's just been around a long time, a war horse. But he's had good results everywhere he's been, and so far things look pretty good at this spot.
All right. Well, Jimmy, I feel like we knocked out both Formby and Pritchett with this particular segment. I was going to make it 2 segments, but I feel like they're really kind of the same, in the same boat and right next to each other. So what we're going to do for this next segment is we had one of our listeners that reached out on Twitter, or X, formerly Twitter. I don't even know if legally I can say Twitter anymore. I don't know. But he says
Twitter.
Okay. He said, hey, I wish Locked On would go over each position group and tell us how many in each group we have committed and how many in that group we might still add. That is from Scott Chandler. So what I think we'll do on this next segment is we'll address that now, at least address one position group, if not 2, in this next segment, because this is sort of a surprise segment to us now. So maybe let's talk about both sides of the line here, because I think we're getting pretty close to being done at offensive line, maybe 1 or 2 more, maybe. And on defensive line, I think everybody's like, hey, we've missed on a few dudes. Let's who's out there that we can go after. So we'll talk about that segment. Okay, so Jimmy, as we mentioned, Scott Chandler from Twitter reached out to you and said, let's talk about the position groups that we're recruiting. And okay, when it comes to offensive line, when I pull up Alabama's commitment list here, Alabama's probably going to end up with the best offensive line class in the country, if you ask me. And you probably won't, but I think some people should.
They should ask you, especially if that's going to be your answer. They should ask you.
Jackson Lloyd, Mika DeBose, both Michael Carroll, all those guys right now on the Mal Waldrop. I can't forget Mal Waldrop. And then there's Ty Haywood out there that a lot of people think will end up in this Alabama class. He'll be a 5-star that would join this class. And I think that would wrap it up. Is that not correct, Jimmy?
No, I think it's likely to wrap it up. There's still a couple of names out there. Malachi Goodman from New Jersey still out there, and he likes Alabama a lot, and Alabama likes him a lot. He's still out there.
He'll end up at Penn State, though.
Probably, but we don't have a prediction there yet. That's just one to monitor. I agree completely with Luke that Ty Haywood is the last. He's the guy you want to fill out the group, give you 5. But in terms, I think the offensive line is a good example in response to Scott's question. I hope everybody out there learns this about numbers, because, for some people may not realize the 25 rule, which you used to be limited to signing 25 new guys a year. That's out. That's not a rule anymore. You can sign as many as you want. You can sign the whole 85, in one class if you want. There's no rule, but there is still an 85 rule, and there is still what I would call a reality rule. And that is, you can't just sign 50 kids every year. You have an 85 limit, and then you got to cut kids and run them off. And a lot of that's murky in terms of the rules. So while the 25 rule is out, the 25 number is still around, because it's still the number that makes the most sense in terms of how many do you want to bring in and still make your numbers work. So you need to focus around, it's going to be around 25. I think that's generally the idea. Now, BOL, we haven't been told. When asked about this at BOL, we said we don't know in terms of a specific number. But that's my whole point, because as it gets to specific numbers, people need to focus on who. It's not the number, it's the who. For instance, going into this year, I think Alabama would have been fine numbers-wise with just signing 3 offensive line. The offensive line wasn't a huge need in terms of, hey, we need to bring in large numbers. It just wasn't. It was like, maybe 3. Well, then what happened? Ty Haywood likes you. Michael Carroll likes you. Jackson Lloyd likes you. Alabama looks up, it's like, you know what? We can't turn away these guys. They're too good to turn away. So it was the who and not the number of players. So it looks like Alabama's going to end up with 5 offensive linemen instead of 3. And the names to watch there are Ty Haywood and Malachi Goodman, down the stretch. And we feel pretty good about Haywood, at BOL. So I think it's going to end up being 5, adding one more. But again, started out with the idea before the whole cycle began, maybe 3. But kids show up, they're too good to turn away. Now, defensive line, pretty interesting here. I think the number all along for defensive line was 3 or 4 as just sort of a general idea. And you've got 2. You've got Antonio Coleman from Saraland. You got London Simmons from Mississippi, who's sort of a bigger nose guard type. So how many more do you want? Well, maybe 2 more, but who's out there? You still would like to sign a guy who can play bandit. Coleman can get away with playing bandit. You could play Coleman at bandit, maybe. But maybe you would like a bandit. Maybe you would like one more defensive lineman. Again, not a huge need spot for Alabama in terms of numbers. There's 14 defensive linemen on the team right now. 14, and you only have 3 spots. You have almost 5 defensive linemen per spot. It's really almost too many because you got to coach all these guys. You got to get them playing time. So I think adding maybe 2 more defensive linemen was sort of a max. That spot's been a little harder for Alabama this time. I'd keep an eye on Floyd Bocard, who played last year at Mobile Christian, who's in Miami. That's going to be an Alabama-Miami battle, most likely. Justice Terry, you got a shot there. A couple of bandits we're watching, Damian Shanklin from Indiana, the kid Javion Campbell from Kentucky, sort of watching those, not super optimistic that that's going to end up Alabama, but it could be, can't rule it out. But Floyd Bocard, probably the name to watch. And if Alabama signs just 3, that's fine. Again, you have 14 on scholarship right now. If anything, that's almost a couple too many, to be honest. And only 1 is out of eligibility after this season, and Tim Smith. Everyone else can come back. So numbers and signing high numbers of defensive linemen was just never in the cards.
Yeah, I hear you. Floyd Bocard, I remember, I think they weren't they in the finals last year?
Yes, they were.
Super 7?
Yeah, and he even played well on that last game against Madison.
He was good. I remember thinking that dude's a dude. And then, of course, he transferred. So he's down in the Miami area. But you're right. I think a lot of people will be surprised to hear that only Tim Smith is out of eligibility.
Jamarian Latham. Everybody goes, well, it's Jamarian Latham. He's no, Jamarian Latham. He hit the double thing. See, Jamarian Latham redshirted
and COVID,
not in 2020. So you got this redshirt year, and you have a COVID year with him. So Jamarian Latham actually has 1 more year. He would be that rare guy that actually would have 1 more year.
He's been at Alabama so long, we may give him another hyphen. Do you think we should? It could be Jamarian Latham.
I like it. I like it. Hopefully he plays. So right now, a projected starter, certainly going to play with the ones. Hope he plays so great. I mean, for his sake, I'm rooting for Jamarian to play so great that he turns pro and heads to the NFL. That would be win-win, right? But he could benefit from another year. Hey, these line positions, hey, give me as many 25-year-olds as they can give me, at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, exactly. I think that would be kind of cool if Jamarian Latham, later he's being interviewed as for the NFL draft. And they're like, well, what did you learn at Alabama? What did you get out of being at Alabama? Well, I got 3 SEC championship rings, a national championship ring. I got to meet all these great connections and be with all my brothers and on the football team. I got 2 degrees and I have 3 hyphens. I think that would be fantastic.
I thought you were going to say that he got a Medicare card.
That would be next. That would be next. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode. Again, if there were any issues today, and we know we've had a few here lately, but Jimmy and I have both been bouncing around a lot, so sorry about that. As when the 4th winds down is when we quit bouncing around quite so much. At least me. I may still travel some, but I'll be at hotels typically that have good Wi-Fi. So hopefully, and I think all the Wi-Fi issues are fixed at my office, so we should be good to go from henceforth. And it would allow me to use words like henceforth. So, and for you to hear them. So that's going to do it for today's podcast. We'll be back tomorrow with more. Hopefully, we'll also have a video later today with Jimmy describing a little more about Kaleb Edwards. So be on the lookout for that. But until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll Tide.